Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another in the Curating Culture Seminar series. My name is Chelsea Stevenson, Research Officer here at the African Caribbean Institute of Jamaica, Jamaica Memory Bank. Now, this might look a little bit strange to you because usually someone else is sitting in this chair. However, today's presenter is extra special, and I hope you enjoy her presentation. So, today's topic will be male fashion in Jamaican dancehall culture, and will be presented to us by our very own research fellow, Mrs. Georgette McGlashen-Miller. Now, Mrs. Miller is an advocate for Jamaican culture and language. She currently serves as the research fellow at the ACIJ JMB, where she has worked for about 1.5 years. She is also a Jamaican language facilitator at Chatwa, Jamaica, promoting the use of Jamaican patois. Georgette holds a master's in cultural studies and a bachelor of arts in entertainment and cultural enterprise management, both from UWI-Mona. Her research explores the resilience of dancehall culture during the COVID-19 pandemic, exemplified by an analysis of Vybz Kartel's song Dancehall. She's also the author of two books, Breaks Time and Seesaw, which are both published in Jamaican patois as well as English. Now, today's presentation is an interesting one. Male fashion, when you hear Mr. Wacky say, style a style and style can spoil, or fashion over style. You know, the style and dancehall, fashion and dancehall go hand in hand. But right now, we're not just talking about the genre dancehall, but the space dancehall. So Georgette's presentation is going to explore the evolution of male fashion in Jamaican dancehall culture, including its historical roots, key influences, and cultural significance. Dancehall as a dynamic cultural space has long served as a platform for Black Jamaican males to express identity, challenge social norms, and redefine masculinity. It is not merely aesthetic, but acts as a subversive and empowering medium that reflecting Jamaica's socio-political and cultural transformation, which is evident from the early 1700s. So that's as far back as the enslavement period. You cannot have dancehall male fashion without the music itself. The presentation will highlight the role of the music, sound systems, and lyrical narratives in shaping fashion trends alongside the socio-economic realities that influence clothing accessibility and creativity. It underscores the importance of male fashion as a cultural marker, contributing to discussion on presentation, empowerment, and Black masculinity. This study not only provides insight into past and present dancehall fashion, but also lays the groundwork for exploring emerging trends and their broader cultural significance. So please help me welcome Mrs. Georgette McGlashen-Miller.
Thank you, everyone, for having me sitting in the other seat today. I must say it's not as comfortable as sitting in the other seats at all times. But that abstract sounded very impressive. I must say that is for the research paper. However, the presentation will be much more simpler than that because I'd like to reach all my student audience, and it is also a promotion for our upcoming dancehall exhibition that will be on February the 20th. So let me just jump right into it because it's a lot of information and we're going to try to pack as much of it as possible. So as Ms. Stevenson said, the title is Male Fashion in Jamaican Dancehall Culture, Male Fashion in the Space. Now, Jamaican dancehall culture can be described as an amalgamation of music, dance, and fashion, which results in the expression of stereotypes and social identities, understood as the lived realities of its adherents. Dancehall culture as a Jamaican subculture is by nature subversive, and as such, the male fashion will act in the same way to subvert traditional norms and values in Jamaican society, especially those inherited from our European colonizers. And as an area of contestation, male fashion in the dancehall space occupies a central role in creating Black male identity, as well as acting to police the borders of Jamaican masculinity. So this presentation will explore male fashion in that space. And by dancehall, we are obviously referring to the space and not just the genre. And to make it more definite, Jamaicans call it the dance. So you can imagine the sound system, the people come out together, and this is not a demarcated space. This could be on the side of a gully, at the side of a house, in the road. More recently, plazas are being used to have dances, but originally dances were kept in lawns, or if I could take it further back, Garth White would say in booths. So the clothes that males wear in Jamaican dancehall function as fashion, dress, or uniforms that perform an identity for black males in Jamaica. The clothes undergo several transformations or have undergone several transformations from the early 1950s to date. And these transformations have captured social, economic, and political changes. According to Buckridge, uh, fashion can be described as the actual style of a garment. And here he's talking about commercial clothing trends that are influenced by social, cultural, and economic factors. While he sees dress as a language through which people communicate their social status, their identity, and their political resistance or even their political stance. So, dress, therefore, is a broader term that encompasses all forms of bodily adornment. So, when you think about dress, you think clothes, you think tattoo, you think hair, you think accessories. But also, another category to consider when we think about fashion, especially in the Jamaican sense, and when we think about protests, it's uniforms. And uniforms can be seen as a dress that shows membership or belonging to a group. Buckridge also shares that in order to understand more about fashion and about dress, we need to view them through the lens of material culture. And material culture is a study of human made physical objects or artifacts that hold meaning. And by studying these artifacts, you get to understand the values, the ideas, and the attitudes. And you can assume what the particular group or community that hold these artifacts, what their values, attitudes, beliefs are. So, for our purposes, material culture in the dancehall would include staple items, for example, the Clark boots, the mesh marina, gold chain, other things that are conspicuous would fall under conspicuous consumption, things that are prevalent and are a must have in the dancehall. For the purposes of this presentation, I've selected a few items that I just mentioned, the Clark's boot, the mesh marina, and the beret. Stars of 2001 shares that the late 1940s, just to state that dancehall isn't just now, there are different schools of thought that will tell you that dancehall emerged in the 50s. Some people say that dancehall, the genre, came in the 1980s. But research shows, and Stars of 2001 says that before the official name was given to the space, that from the 1940s, when they had live jazz and they had mentor bands, and as I mentioned before, Garth White spoke about the booths where they would have the soirees, as long as people of enslaved heritage gathered and there was music, they had these halls where they would go and have dance and enjoy themselves and dress in ballroom gowns. For example, the Set Girl exhibition showed information about that. So, but in the 40s, we could see where there was a transition. And I'm highlighting this because we're talking about how the sound system comes into play. Mm-hmm. So the transition from live bands, from
big
jazz,
bands, jazz
right,
bands, to the use of recording music.
To the use of recording music and the sound system. And since then, the sound system has been the main driver for Jamaica popular music. Sonia Stanley Naya is always advocating that we should consider the sound system as Jamaica's national instrument because of the prominent and dominant place of the sound system in our popular culture. Because due to the sound system, we credit the sound system, Salzov says, with the rise of the local recording industry, as well as the sound system has provided a cultural space for the invention and reinvention of Jamaican males, the invention of Jamaican music genres, and I think we've listed 8, but I want to add one to the mix, but I don't get my PhD yet, so I tread in light. So we have Mento, Ska, we have Rocksteady, there's reggae, there's dancehall, there's dub, there's Naya Bingi, and I want to say gospel because I've gone to Nashville and I was also surprised by a search online when I look for gospel. There's no such thing as gospel music. There is Christian contemporary. I mean, there's a Negro spiritual kind of thing, but gospel is what we do in Jamaica, and it's different everywhere else around the world. So the sound system has a relevant part in our culture. And the music that the sound system plays allows us to enact the fashion, the dress, the clothes that we wear. So without the music, the fashion, the style, the dress wouldn't have such significance, so to speak. It would need more help. Stolzoff also shares that dance halls have always existed, for example, in marketplaces. And when Mentor was created during the enslavement period, it was a creation among lower class Black Jamaicans. So that is the importance, another important thing. Because of the type of people that created the dancehall space, this also impacts the type of music, it's a material culture, the
And
type
the
of message, the type of clothes, their attitudes, their beliefs, everything that it says that it would. So I've segmented, so to speak, 4 different eras in which I want to discuss male clothing in Jamaica. Are the ones that stood out to me because this is a researched area, not an area that I'm an expert in that I study, but I think I've been a Jamaican long enough to know these things. And I've been reading and writing long enough about cultural studies, music, and popular culture. So these are topics in Reggae Month that everybody should be able to identify with and understand. So my first period is the 1950s, early 1960s, and I'm calling it the era of the three-piece suit. So the socio-political landscape at that time was pre-independence in Jamaica. And in this era, Jamaican men grappled with colonial legacies. So we are colonized, we are moving towards independence, but we are still exposed to British culture and the influence from the Windrush generation as well, because at that time, you were enslaved yesterday and you're free today. What you do? You don't have a job. So these opportunities come up, unfortunately or fortunately, in the motherland, and you're looking for employment. So we have the Windrush being loaded with Caribbean and Jamaican people going overseas looking for economic opportunities. But you're also going into an environment where you're not dressed for.
The climate is much different from what you are used to
Exactly.
here at home. So it's an adaptation of, you're adapting, but you're also trying to make it your own.
And it sounds oversimplified, but we didn't take any clothes from the continent. It's the clothes that you get. So before we even started to think about the idea of dress and identity, we were already wearing the colonizers' clothes. So we would say, all right, that was the fashion of the day. So in addition to that, you're becoming independent and you want to create your own identity, but you still have these influences over you. So you will see Jamaicans at that time donning the three-piece suit, right? And I want to talk about the three-piece suit as well as the zoot suit after I explain the significance of the three-piece suit. So in those times, the authority or the power of the day would socialize Jamaican men, Jamaican people into the British standards. You would be moving farther away from African ideologies, African philosophies, African ways of being.
I like to call them, vestiges of colonialism that we still see today.
And that is a point as well. So even though you want to create your own self, there is this standard that is set of what is decent, what is accepted, and how you are supposed to look. Your identity is being determined for you. So the fashion of this era could be analyzed through a lens of respectability, politics, and that is still among us today when we look at how our males are stereotyped and where they wear some clothes they can't wear. I mean, it goes for everything, and it sounds like, yeah, we know this. But you could be a construction worker, but you're not in a construction hat, but you're in a non-construction place, just like that. And you're stereotyped. That's what a criminal.
As a criminal.
Right. So the respectability politics would see Jamaican men who want to be thought of as good, decent, moral citizens wear this three-piece suit. So the respectability politics came about through a researcher, Evelyn Higginbotham, that's her name, Higginbotham, she spoke about self-presentation strategies. And this was something done in America amongst Black women that say that women would present themselves in a way that they would not be stereotyped, right? And so they would not be rejected by white stereotypes. So similarly, our Jamaican men going overseas and, you know, existing in this new, soon to be independent Jamaica would want to look like respectable citizens.
So the suit, the hat, the
Yes.
well-shined shoes.
So you would see things like pork pie hat, the well-shined shoes, and of course, even with the climate, you know, the jackets.
I was just about to mention
the shirts.
We live in a tropical marine climate. Where are you going in a 3-piece
But don't
suit?
worry, the twist is coming. The twist is coming. And I also wanted to mention the zoot suit. So now the zoot suit was another kind of jacket and pantsuit, long sleeve shirt that was influenced by American jazz musicians. And you know, at that time, Jamaica was listening to a lot of American popular music before we started to flesh out and express our own music. However, the zoot suit came to be identified with resistance and rebellion because in June 1943, there was a civil war that broke out in California among the wearers, or the prominent wearers of the zoot suit, who were the Latinos and the Mexican. So that time around World War II, there were rations, there was scarcity, and they were saying that the zoot suit are like some big wide leg pants. It's taking too much material to make that. We need this material to make army wear, you know. But because it was the identity of this group, the Mexican and Latino, they're like, we are not changing our zoot suits. So they were attacked and a serviceman was killed and a riot broke out. And somehow in the diaspora, other colonized people thought that was unfair. We caught onto it. And it's created a sense of, you know, solidarity with the Mexican and Latinos, but also a sense of rebellion. And it was ironic as well because it's a suit. And
imagine something as respectable as a suit,
right,
connotating to rebellion and resistance and revolt and rebellion.
But it will not be the first time that a suit has attracted this kind of response, because if we look at the civil rights movement in America with Martin Luther King, I think it was intentional that his protest wear was a suit. Whenever they went to the streets and they went to march and thing, it was always a suit. But the system was so vile and inhumane, they would not offer him the type of dignity to say, oh, he's a decent, upstanding citizen. So they would still revolt and beat them up and run them off the road and whatever else. So in that case, the suit did not work. The suit exposed the system. But in the 50s, that was it. However, locally in Jamaica, the Rastafari movement or the Rastafari sect at that time chose to maintain as much of the African memory that they could. So they would wear more natural clothes, and of course the hair, a part of the material culture, to say that we're not going to conform to colonialism. We're not cutting our hair. And at that time, we had a lot of seamstress and tailors. They would make their own clothes. And as a way to identify with the continent, they would adapt the colors from the Ethiopian flag, red, green, and gold. And you would see this in the dancehall space as well.
Because when you mentioned earlier uniform, the first group that came to my mind was the Rastafari. Because when even without their locks, without their their turbans, you can always identify them from the natural colors, natural fiber, their uniforms that they wear. Even like Rastafari, not to preempt you, but even like Rastafari performers, the number one that comes to my mind is always Luciano.
Yes.
He is always in, I saw him the other day at Rebel Salute, and even though he was more dressed down than usual, he's always in his militant garb, his coat, his pants, his hat, always either khaki or, you know, army green. Yeah. So yeah, you always think of uniform, you think of Rastafari.
And that is a reminiscence of His Majesty as well, who's always in his uniform. But we're going to get into the love affair with Jamaica and military or army wear, what I call it. So my second time period is the 60s to 70s, the golden years, the golden age of Jamaica reggae music, but also probably one of the most fashionable time of Jamaican male dress And this was also captured through two of our cult films, The Harder They Come and Rockers, that also had many Jamaican artists. But the style that was worn later on influenced capitalists to refresh their brand, refresh their market, and to come up with modernized version of the same styles. So the political landscape at that time in the early 60s as a continuity from independence. We are now in the independence period, and many of the Jamaican youths are disappointed with the lack of opportunity or disappointed in what they believe would have been a free, more prosperous,
Like
you know?
all that independence wasn't all it was chalked up to be.
Exactly, at all. And also in the 60s, what would have influenced some of the dress to add to their mood were the civil wars that were happening. The 60s was a very tumultuous time right across the world. We have the Black Power movement. There were riots across the US. There was riots in France. There was riots in Brazil. The 60s was just tumultuous all over. And of course, we had the Walter Rodney riots, 1968, here in Jamaica. So during that time, the rude boy subculture and the Rastafari movement emerged and started to be significantly identified. You know, you could say, oh, something is happening here, because even Hugh Shearer, the prime minister at that time that declared Walter Rodney persona non grata, realized this movement among the Rastafari, and even Walter Rodney was accused of, you know, making contact and having classes and session and stirring up people towards this revolt. But the fashion trend at that time took on what you printed me with, which was that militancy, that army look. So the eras aren't smooth, just like the music, to say as one finish and next one start, they would overlap.
They kind of overlap and
Yeah.
transition into, you might say, holdbacks from the previous era, but
Right.
definitely the newer one is a more distinct fashion trend of itself.
So that's why I wanted to comment about three-piece suit. So then you would see variations and versions of the three-piece suit. So like the Rastas who would want to wear something that looks more African, you would see Rasta male, for example, Junior Reid and Gregory Isaacs. They have the locks, they have the hair, but they're wearing probably the vest from a suit and a pants, no long sleeve shirt, and then Gregory would probably wear the jacket. And then you would also see the Clark's boot, which became a big part, which is a big part of male fashion. And a lot of people don't know that, you know, Clark's originated.
Clark's isn't.
I want to say, but I don't want to say it. Clark's is not Jamaican.
Clark's is not Jamaican.
Right. Clark's is from the UK, and that is the irony. But when you take this fashion and you turn it into dress, you give it a different meaning, and Clark's has been turned into protest fashion, or protest dress, I should call it, because since fashion is more commercialized. So in the UK, the Clark's brothers created this shoe from sheep fat that was a leftover. They originally had what kind of store? They had a store, but the leftover fat from the sheep, they used it to make the shoes, and they didn't think it would take off so well. Somehow the shoe got to Jamaica because of the colonizers coming here, and the army used to wear the desert trek.
The desert trek.
Yes, and Jamaicans saw it. They were very expensive when they just came to Jamaica, and they were sold at the Issa building on King Street. I think that's right up the road from us. And King Street was where the first big, the name of the store is eluding me now, but that was the first big Clark store. Very expensive. They were a symbol of power, wealth, riches. But Jamaica is probably one of the best dressed poor countries in the world. If I am to say that, it doesn't matter the cost of the thing. If it is good and durable, they're going
to get it.
So once Clark's got into the country, and they say, oh, so it's rich people that wear this. We may
a status symbol, that's the word.
It is a status symbol because it gives you status, it gives you power, and it symbolizes wealth. So the inner city person, the man in the dance hall, who is, and I don't like to use these words, disenfranchised, unattached, this whole heap of this word. But I heard Professor Donna Hope said that because people in the inner city experience so much a lot of things are displaced from them. Dance hall is a way of taking back what
Taking back
you've lost.
yeah.
So in getting a Clark's boot, even though it's the most expensive thing and you don't have the money to buy it, you've given yourself some sense
you
of
kind of
dignity.
brought it back.
Yes.
You brought back your
some
dignity.
worth, some sense of self. I know that I'm saying it to you. You know, it's the women who are always accused and bashed in our society for being too fashionable at the expense of the children. But here we have men buying expensive Clark shoes, you know? So that was a part of the Clarks thing. And I was very impressed when I learned that, oh, it came from the army. But also the beret. The beret was a hat worn in the French army. It was not intended for
fashion and everyday
everyday
use.
But then you see the symbol of the beret also in the Cuban Revolution. You see revolutionary figures, and someone in dancehall that I always noticed wore a beret was Peter Tosh, always signaling his masculinity. And in some ways, I would say that the 60s and 70s
and even like
in
those
Jamaica,
tactical jackets. Now that you're saying the image of Peter Tosh in like a tactical green jacket,
sometimes
and maybe like army
even
camouflage
Middle Eastern.
pants. Yes.
Peter Tosh have that kind of effect and with the fashion, even when nobody else in the world was doing that. So I was saying that with the beret, with the Clarks, even the mesh merino. The mesh merino was from Scandinavia. It was an army vest. And it made sense out of all the other artifacts that Jamaicans would want to wear the mesh merino given our climate. But by the time it reached Jamaica, adapted, represented, reworked, when they came, they were just in plain colors. Now we have the red, green, and gold, ice green and gold mesh merino. We have them in multicolors. And it's a signature part of dancehall male fashion. We see all the time protege popcorn. I mean, Shabba Ranks made it into like a total sexy under lingerie outwear in wear. I mean, Shabba was the man with the mesh merino and the jackets, and there's that photo of him collecting the Grammy in the mesh merino. But Jamaican male, the significance of these fashion or these dress styles to our dancehall adherents is that it asserts defiance and resilience. And so I was saying, in many ways, we could think of the 1960s and 70s in Jamaica as Jamaica's Civil War. I mean, with the standoff, the political war, partisan between JLP and PNP, it was also among that time. And, you know, you couldn't wear certain colors, you couldn't go certain places. So men would wear these things to give themselves a sense of toughness, a sense of roughness, a sense of security. And also the desert trek, you know, would symbolize we're having a rough time. It is a fight. We too are in a war. And with the state militia that would be put in place to like police and to secure the country. Because one time when our police would visit a dance hall session, anybody wearing a Clarks was considered a bad man. And the rude boys who adopted the wearing of the Clarks from the Rastas were many times locked up, put into jail for wearing that. But it didn't stop them, right? It didn't stop them from becoming an inmate. And it caused my mind to think about recent, not last year, this year, but recent enough to remember our students who were being banned from schools for wearing Clarks to school. And as an onlooker, if you don't know the history of the shoe and what it signifies, you'd say, oh, but it's a shoe, because I mean, Clark shoes aren't outrageous. They don't have loud and vulgar language on them, but it's what they symbolize. And I don't know if these students who are trying to get Clarks because they're expensive to say I'm wealthy or whatever, realize a connection, as well as they might, because they are showing some kind of defiance. But I don't understand why a school would stop a child from coming because they're wearing a Clarks. Yeah, but this is what fashion does. So fashion, dress, uniforms. But as a uniform and as a student, ironically enough, they identify with a group of defiant people by wearing the Clarks. So I'm moving on quickly to my third era, which would be the 1980s and 1990s. I've called that section Dancehall Globalization and Material Expression. So Professor Donna Hopes does a lot of work in this area. talking about conspicuous consumption in her book Inner the Dancehall and also Man Vibes, because the dancehall is really a male-dominated space. She did work on the British Link-Up crew and spoke about the conspicuous consumptions, and this is the time when we would have been introduced to the big gold chain, the heavy gold chains, and this was an influence from hip-hop culture. And of course, another African diaspora sect, African Americans, they would have started wearing the big gold chains and heavy jewelry, which recently in the 2000s have been embellished by ice and all these diamonds and
It's
things.
like you're showing overt wealth. So
Yes.
while wearing the clocks was covert wealth, now that is the big chain, the iced out chain, being consuming more designer
Right.
brands now,
Right.
showing overt wealth. Like
And that's why I still say fashion and dress, because at some point you can't see the difference between the stance that you're taking, because this is still commercialized production, and you've not really, when you come to the hip hoppers and the 1980s 1990 bling bling culture, you don't really see the difference in versus when the Rastas would wear the clocks, or if they would not wear a jacket, or if they would take off the shirt and leave a vest alone. You see the distinction between them. But the influence of the big chains and the gold tooth, and I remember, it's strange that I'm saying in the 80s, 90s for the go-to, because Uri in his time, 70s, used to wear beadjewel teeth. Uri was just ahead of his time with almost like everything, right? So he, I think, is the first one that I recognize with beadjewel teeth. And his own is different from Ninja Man, front teeth, gold teeth, side teeth, back teeth. Thank God. I love Jamaican people. We have teeth. Nobody have a tooth, right? We have teeth. So these things started to become more prominent in the 80s, 90s, the oversized jewelry. But not only that, a lot of gender norms as it relates to dress and a lot of policing of the borders of masculinity in dancehall fashion started to change. So also in that time, you would see a change in like the style of the clothes. The big pants weren't, well, Shabba would always wear the big linen suit, but you would see more tailored suit coming in as well. You would see the American basketball jersey, those big Patrick Ewing basketball shirts. You would see, I know them as tracksuit. I mean,
like the
sweats,
the wind,
sweats
like the
and
windbreakers.
windbreakers, right? And I noticed something when I was doing the research that Bob Marley didn't wear any like tailored jacket at all.
When you
He wore
think of,
denim.
he wore a lot of denim. Bob loved the
Yeah.
Canadian tuxedo. I actually,
Yeah.
we before
Well,
this episode,
early Bob without the locks
early Bob.
would be in a
when
tux.
we were discussing for this episode, and we were thinking of dressing on theme. Obviously we didn't, but I was like thinking about which Jamaican musician fashion I could have easily emulated with what I had available to me, and Bob Marley was one of them.
Yeah.
Because he wore a lot of Adidas. He wore.
Yes.
I remember when watching the Bob Marley movie, and I saw he had on Adidas Sambas, which have made a big comeback in the
Right.
last year or two. And I
Since
also
the
had.
movie.
Well, it came out before the movie, but when I was watching the movie, and I was like, fashion never really goes out. So people
Yeah.
don't throw away your clothes. It's gonna come back. But he had on his Adidas Sambas. He'd wear the football shorts. He always had on his denim, or he had on like khaki color.
Yeah.
But Bob Marley's, because he had a uniform,
Right.
you could always identify with him.
So one of Bob Marley's skills, I would say, is his ability, and I think it's the same kind of skill Cartel has to connect with the people. So in him wearing denim, he would identify with the working class, because denim was things that crop-shares and people used to wear in America. And then also the khaki, of course, and the locks, he would identify with the Rastas,
Rastafari.
and then with the sports shorts. So Bob Marley was of the people, among the people. So at no time he would alienate himself then from their
himself from
struggles by wearing a colonial suit or a jacket. And of course, we see Peter Tosh in the military. Now I think Bunny Wailer would wear more African garments with the print and the things that she can, things like that. But in the 80s, 90s, all this heavy jewelry and the things that they wore showed a kind of hyper masculinity. And as you said, it goes towards a status to say that I have money, this is my wealth, and I can wear it. And if you think about it, it makes sense because gold and diamonds and those things do not lose value, in the way that dollars can. And this was also, the dress was also influenced by globalization because dancehall itself had started to
open up,
cross borders because at that time Shabba
I
was
about
an
to say, when
international artist.
Shabba was an international artist. He was signed in New York.
Right. And Patra, even though we're talking about males, she also went ahead and our music was getting bigger since Bob Marley and reggae. So now, so I don't go over time, my final era would be the 2000s presents, where I called hypervisibility. And at this point, you're wondering about what statements are being made about dress and body alterations and what is it about? What is it about? So when you look at the socio-political landscape, which is what I always try to go to say, why are the people responding like this? Because the material culture is your response to your environment and what you're taking out and what you're holding on to and what you're using to create your own identity. So at that time, digital media just went wild.
Blew up.
Right. Mainstream media was there for those who could afford it, but social media allowed the regular Joe, the regular Mary Jane to record themselves, to send yourself to the world.
And the world
at a minimal cost.
The world opened up for free sometimes.
Right.
The world opened up so much more than you could ever believe with the advent of, the popularization of the internet, smartphones, handheld devices, social media. So things are just more accessible, more attainable.
And fashion trends were more cross-cultural. Everything became cross-cultural. So I could be in solidarity with you in Israel because I have access to this. I have access to your struggle now, as well as I could wear fashions that are outside of my climate, I should say.
Outside of their climate.
Right, outside of
Sometimes I see like the kids out like half a tree or Ligoni or Barbican in hoodies.
And
I have to think to myself, I was like, are you not hot?
Yes.
Boiling?
Well, I guess it's similar to the tracksuit and the sweatsuit that they would wear in the 70s, fashion and style, and to say, even though a lot of them
fashion
were athletes, fashion over style, as Bogle would say. And then even though I didn't do a lot on Bogle is in a class by himself with that kind of gothic leather.
Avant-garde.
Yes.
He didn't care.
Yeah. But it also connects with international, I would say, something outside of Jamaica, in the same way that Cartel in the 2000, through his body alterations, the bleaching and the tattoo, would connect with, say, Tupac in America. Instead of having Thug Life, you would have Cartel on his torso. With the bleaching, he also connects with Michael Jackson. So like he would pull on these internationally known identities and plug into it.
He turned, as you said, body alterations. He turned body alterations into a fashion statement.
Yes, bleaching.
I've
passed
tattoos.
So many of the same person on the road, especially the men. No, you go into the dance hall and all the guys have a big beard, even though Cartel didn't have a beard. But everybody is like a coloring book. And the bleaching makes sense if you think of it on a practical level. Makes sense that it is fashion and not self-hatred. Because we have melanin. And when you put on a tattoo, it doesn't show so readily. So you have to light it out for the tattoo to show if you're going to be like a coloring book. And these discussions are going on, whether it's self-hatred or whether it's fashion and things like that. But definitely in the 2000s, you would see even Alkaline with the tattoo eyes, since we're on the thing of tattoo, whether it was contacts or not. But a lot of design, a lot of modifications that we would have said were feminine should be left to the female. The skinny jeans, the tight pants. But then you say Cartel would transgress, and other artists like even Elephant Man would transgress, and what was the name of that other RDX?
RDX,
with the
yeah.
bleaching of the hair and the shaving of the eyebrow
the
and the
slits in the
cutting.
eyebrow, yeah.
Right. But at the same time, you're wearing a Clarks.
Still hyper masculine.
Still hyper masculine. So yeah, I might be in a cut off pants and a bleach out masculine, but I'm wearing a Clarks. So the message is, I don't know if I should say they're conflict, but there are many more. So it shows you that the identity becomes more complex. So even while they maintain some of the same meanings from the past, new meanings and new layers are going on. So definitely in the 2000s, and that is still happening now, we've had more being added to male fashion. We've had more local designers coming up. For example, one that will be collaborating with us on our exhibition on February 20th, Tribe 9, Troy Orine. We have people like the Fashion Barber, that you see these hyper styles and what's the word? The creativity book. You know, a different sense of self, a different representation being done by the male.
And not being afraid
to just express yourself and identify
yourself
with international identities. So a lot of the clothing choices in dancehall, they become strategic in creating like your own identity. There's not much of the uniformity anymore. The push is towards being different, to being unique, to stand out, to be more visible than everybody else.
I will say though, even in being, because so for instance, like nowhere in the 2020s, you see, not that I want to frequent the dance hall, but you see like online, you see the young men, their uniform is a polo shirt, a polo shirt. They'll have on the knee length denim shorts, and then now shoes is a variation. They either have on clogs or slides
or some unisex looking shoes,
yes,
that really blurring the gender lines now.
The gender lines,
Yeah.
and even the shorts are not baggy like they used to be. Very
tight, like
fitted.
60s basketball shorts.
So that would be like the uniform, as you say. It's international. It's more international. It's what they see being worn internationally, and it's still such a symbol wise.
Yeah, and I mean with some of the competitions that are in dancehall now for best dress and for most unique dress, and you know, Mrs. this and Mr. that, people are encouraged now to express themselves and form their own identity. So I don't have much more to say, more than, you know, the fashion capitalists will always come with more commercial styles, but we've seen where Jamaican dancehall fashion has been used to influence international markets, especially from the movie rockers. And we see the nomads are the ones that I think nowadays that still carry that look from the movies, that horse mouth, and everybody were wearing those multicolored shirts, the vest, the tight pants, and the wide leg pants and the cut-off shorts. It's a fusion of a lot of things that's going on. But definitely it evolves. But overall, the idea of dressing in the dancehall is always to bring value to the male, to locate his status, to say who he is outside of what the system defines him to be. I know the last thing to say, in Donna Hope's book about masculinities, man vibes, she talk about the different type of masculine tropes in the dancehall, and you can identify them by dress. You know, you can identify them by dress and their characteristics as well. So that's my short presentation on masculine male fashion in the dancehall, and how males in Jamaica seem to assert their masculinity, whether through hypermasculinity, whether through identifying with the army, or whether through copying and then reinventing British colonial fashion to dress.
Well, Georgette, thank you so much for that presentation. That was a great presentation. Very informative. I was a bit apprehensive coming in because I've never hosted. I kept on reassuring me that it's fine. And you're actually right, because these are things that we do talk about, we do see in everyday life, we consume on social media. So I have when you started out your presentation, I was making a few notes just while our audience preps themselves to ask questions. Please, everyone, ask questions. But my first would be the evolution of the dancehall as a space. Why have the spaces evolved? You mentioned going from the lawns to the lawns, and then now even like plazas, and have the fashion also evolved with the spaces.
Well, while not being a dancehall expert,
Based on your research.
right, people make use of their environment. So originally, the boots that Cartwright spoke about is what would have been available to the enslaved at that time, and then independence time and post-independence. Even now, unfortunately, that I'm answering this question, we do not have demarcated spaces in Jamaica to host events. We do not have spaces where we keep dancehall and session. So like some of the earlier spaces where dancehall was held, like at the lawns, I think it's, I don't want to call the word wrong, Chochama or Kokomo Lawn.
Kokomo.
Kokomo Lawn. These would have been privately owned spaces, not spaces that the government would have said, all right, this is where you go and have an event, but there's a Noise Abatement Act that say you cannot have the noise louder than a certain time within the residence, but we still don't have these spaces. So you find that spaces are created because the people have to live and the dance can't stall, because outside of the noise and the excitement, it is a lived reality, it's a livelihood, it is a space where commerce happens, it's a space of interaction, it's a space of therapy. The dance hall is a place where people have to go to survive.
Because I'm even thinking now, we are down on the waterfront, and there are no specific like demarcated spaces for events. So people will go to parking lots, because I remember
Right.
events happening and the parking lot behind us there on Ocean Boulevard, they'll block off Ocean Boulevard and host events there.
So UDC would give them permission to do that, and they would have to do it in a time when no traffic is going on. So late night, which is a time for dancehall anyway, coming from the tradition of our people gathering late at night.
But now even like people, so all right, so for instance, so I asked if fashion evolves with spaces, is that, so for instance, Uptown Mondays is kept up on Constant Spring Road at a plaza, versus when dance halls, lawns used to be below the clock.
Yeah, and below the clock also, you would see the dance hall in the streets. It's like Pasa Pasa Weddy Weddy, it's in the streets because that is a space. And it sounds ironic, but that is the space where people come to congregate. And the streets will talk about the crossroads in our culture, in our history, where we meet to talk, the clock of half a tree, and things like this. So I think it's the availability as well as who is the promoter, who's putting it on. But we are going to create a space, and I noticed that events in Jamaica, we have normalized that culture to create the space because we have no assigned or designated space to host these things. And everything cannot go to the national stadium or the national arena.
Okay, so here we have a question here. Can Sister Georgette speak to the perception that dancehall artists and patrons appear to have forsaken the tailor, which was dominant in the 80s and 90s, in favor of commercial designers? Example, Versace.
Okay, so that came in the 80s and 90s that they say about the bling bling and the influence from America, because you are now getting ready-made clothes that are cheaper. Now in our times, it's Shein and
Timu.
Right. But because remember, the tailor and the dressmaker, it's custom made. So it's not that we have, well, yes, we don't go to them as much. But when you want something unique, you want something different. And it has actually opened up avenues for other people to start big businesses. Shades of Africa and Troy himself, Tribe 9. But the easy access and the fast fashion and the inexpense of the artifact is what you're working with, because you have to live, you have to wear the clothes. So let me just finish. And it's not that we weren't buying into fashion because the tracksuit and the Clarks and the mesh marina, none of those things were made here. So really the people who were supporting the local market were most of the Rastas who were creating their own non-colonial, non-European wear. Religious people like revivalists, who that also came out the Rastas came out of that. And then church people and females and uniforms. I think uniforms are our biggest, I mean by uniforms, I mean school uniforms are our biggest supporters of local dressmakers and tailors. But our economic reality cannot be ignored, and that is something that has been happening prior to independence. And people at the end of the day are going to make an economic decision. And I think most of the times, even though we see this flamboyance and this conspicuous consumption, people are making an economic decision.
Because, but even to the same point, when I think about 90s dancehall, I think about the way the introduction of high fashion into the Jamaican dancehall culture, because prior to that, the tailors is what was available to you.
You didn't have many options.
You didn't have many options, if someone was sending a barrel, the Moschino wasn't going to be in it. But now with our dancehall artists earning more, becoming international artists,
the globalization and that same opening up,
earning more, they go overseas. They see the American artists shopping in Louis Vuitton, in Gucci, in Dolce & Gabbana, in Versace. So that is now where they say, me a big artist too, so I should be wearing these brands.
And 2 points on that. One of the drivers for that also is the music. When the artist, so I saw a clash with Roned, and I don't remember the name of the other person. And the guy was saying, oh, I saw this thing, I heard that Bounty Killer did this to you and that and that. And Roned comeback was not to say, Bounty can't do that to me. Roned was, look for my watch where me I wear, how much what I have on worth, and all of this. So the music pushes you, because even Clarks, I mean, Vybz Kartel, Clarks was not the first time a song was done about Clarks. Little John in the 60s, 70s did a song about kick out your foot in your Clarks booty, right? So that makes what? I have to get a Clarks, this is in. And then you go into the dance and you are now a part of this group. You have a Clarks. And that is something, I want to say it's human, but I don't want to get bashed for that. You want to identify with something bigger than you.
It is human. You want to be a part of a group.
But I also want to say though, in moving away from fashion to dress and in creating your own identity, I'm from a long line of dressmakers. I don't make dresses. Everything I make look like a cushion or a curtain. But my mother and my sisters sew. And I remember in the 90s when people would buy the ready-made basketball Patrick Ewing jersey and thing and take them to my sister to get them altered. And then it would have to make the shirt into a dress or, something different. So there's that aspect of it as well. So I wouldn't say that we've abandoned them totally, but for different reasons.
Even there is you mentioned a few local designers, but there's one I really admire. Her name is Ria Imani, but her label's name is also Ria Imani. She is located in Negril, Westmoreland. And you would think that, as you said, we haven't totally abandoned the dressmaker, but when you see her social media and when she talks about her designs and her passion, and you see people from all over the world are still ordering her things, because people still, even though you can go to Shein, you can go to Fashion Nova, you can and get these things, but the quality and the craftsmanship. So even when people would buy the jerseys and bring them to Donnet, it's not only to alter it, but it's to get a certain level of craftsmanship.
Right, and a certain level of
uniqueness. That even though two people might be in the dance in a Michael Jordan jersey,
right?
But nobody's jersey is cut in a blouse and skirt like yours, or cut out in the back like yours. So it's the same thing with male fashion.
And I mean, we've had designers like even Biggie that has been designing in dancehall for the longest while, and of course there's Max Brown. We always say Beanie Man. Beanie Man is an icon for the dancehall, always carrying that tradition of the suit.
Always fashionable.
Right. So we've not totally abandoned the designers, the dressmakers, and people like that.
But even so I had this written down here about the uniqueness and still being a part of a group but not being the same.
Right.
And I wrote down here, the sound system, the dance, but also fashion and the video light.
Yes. And it's a video light that drive the difference. And I know that you said the video light. I remember something when I was studying that I heard. So usually the video light is occupied by the female and center stage. So that was early dance, 60s, 70s, 80s. By the time I come on to 90s and you have Elephant Man and the tight jeans, you start seeing dance crews. And there would be a uniform among the crew, but they would take center stage with the video light. So because the video light is going to be there, even though it shifts the gaze a little, so now you have male gaze, now you have female gaze, right? These groups would be uniforming themselves in designer clothes that they have altered to be the same but to look different.
And then, another you brought up. So someone else asked, what are your thoughts on the transition of male fashion in dancehall reflecting queer fashion, tighter clothing, louder stylistic expression, while still being an aggressive homophobic space?
Well, that is a very interesting question because we spoke about the lines being blurred and Vibes Cartel. And so there was this paper that I think the title of it said, from when me want dance or we wait for the real bad man them dance. And it spoke about how dancehall is a space for everyone, where everyone comes to dancehall. The bad man, the queer man.
It's a start of Ding Dong song, and the real bad man them
Right.
dance and can't dance.
And that was a song about bad man forward, but that was talking about Bounty Killer. This one was talking about queer males. No, identities are complex. Just like we're saying that you can't tell, because bleaching was something that females did. The tight pants was something that females did. Now you have men doing it. And then what about the pants below the waist?
That don't mean nothing
the baggy
at all.
pants. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that because you can't tell. You can't say it's only queer male. The queer fashion is not being considered as queer in the dance hall, although it's considered as fashion and dress. And the bad man that put on the tight pants saying, oh, the girl, them looking at me, I'm still a gallus. It may still a shutter. It may still any one of those masculinities that Puff Hope described.
It's almost would the word be oxymoron?
I'm not sure if it's an oxymoron.
Maybe
I think
that's
it's the
an
same.
oxymoron.
I think how I feel about it is the same way I feel about bleaching and the conversations around bleaching. How people want to say that bleaching is self-hatred and it's not loving your black skin. It's a fad, it's fashion, it will pass. Queer people were here before, they're still going to be here. Everybody fashion. And it's also influenced by the global commercial capitalist market, and it's what is in.
What is in, what is selling, what is hot.
Yeah.
As soon as something else comes in,
Exactly.
it's gonna go right. It's gonna go right out.
Yeah, because for the life of me, my parents would not understand why would you go and buy a ripped jeans.
Ripped jeans.
You could take your old jeans and cut it off.
And it costs more than the solid jeans.
And it's not a full jeans. But it still fit into that group. It's still wear the dress to say that, oh, you're not wearing no regular jeans. And it's still fitting with the fashion as well.
And I think one of the last things I have here written down is back to Clarks. One of the most iconic fashion symbols in Jamaica that isn't
Jamaica's
even Jamaican.
national shoe.
Jamaica's national shoe is Clarks' love for Jamaica. So just like how Jamaicans love Clarks,
Yes.
Clarks loves Jamaica because recently they opened a flagship store here in Jamaica.
Yes.
And then they do have a Jamaican inspired shoe.
Right.
And
two actually.
Two Jamaican inspired shoes. And they did a collab with Popcorn sometime last year, which honestly, if you're a fan of Jamaican, music, dancehall music, Popcorn's rise to fame, rise to notoriety, singing about Clarks, wearing Clarks, that's what, catapulted his career. So it was so interesting to see the appreciation that a global brand mind you, Jamaica, everything with enough like salt. So it wasn't much of a surprise, but it was just good to see that such a global brand was able to appreciate us, a country that has been wearing their shoes and having their shoes as a symbol for decades.
Yeah. And I think they've also played into the idea of the Jamaican culture. And if you go to the Clark's original website online, you see in their history and about, they've highlighted Jamaica as a place that, they have loyalty. And in curating our upcoming exhibition for February 20th, we've gotten sponsorship from Signature Style, that is in Central Plaza, which is the local Clark's brand in Jamaica. And her story, Miss Diagla Smith, is a very interesting story, and how she got to be selling Clarks, but she's really committed to the brand. And what I want to say about, you mentioned popcorn, what I want to say about Clarks, and even the question before, is that the more things change, the more they remain the same.
Yeah.
Because now that you mentioned popcorn, and I remember Cartel, and with all the fashion influences and statements that Cartel has made recently, in his two most recent appearances that I can remember, we saw him at the Christmas party. What was he wearing?
Clark's.
And he was wearing a
suit.
suit.
He's
Full suit.
That's what
At
that's
his Freedom Street,
now,
exactly. At Freedom Street, he was wearing a suit.
He came out in a suit.
And that's why I said the more things change, the more they remain the same, because there is still this respectability politics at work to say that I'm a changed person, I'm a different person, and you can be identified with traditional Jamaican values. And I mean, with this rhetoric, one burner, you are no longer a gallus, you're now a decent, law upstanding, abiding citizen. So the more things change, the more they remain the same. So Clark's has also played into the Jamaican rude boy culture by adding the bank robber, which is not bank grabber, it's actually bank robber, for those who don't know.
When you look at the back of the shoe, you see the thief.
Yes. So it's very interesting though, but I decided to do this research and also to mount the exhibition because emphasis in fashion many times is placed on the female in dancehall, but our men are very fashionable, have always been fashionable, and I must say it's a good look, and I just want to big up the mans them in dancehall.
All right, so thank you so very much, Georgette, for coming on Curating Culture. It's been a long time coming. It's been in the works. I'm so glad. Next month, you'll have back your regular chair and I'll be behind the camera once again. Coming up this month is February at the ACIJ JMB. We are having AYA, or rebranded February program. We have 4 events lined up, the first of which was this, Curating Culture. Then we will be having our Jamaica Day school tour, which will culminate on the 28th, will be the week of, and culminate on the 28th. Our education outreach officer will be traveling all across the island, visiting schools for Jamaica Day. Then we have our launch, of course, of the
male fashion.
We just call it dancehall exhibition. We'll be having our launch of the dancehall exhibition on February 20th of February. Then we have our film screening of the movie Rockers. I know lots of you out there never seen it before, so stay tuned for information on how you can come and watch the film screening. Date for that?
28th.
The 28th?
28th of
the
February.
28th of February for the film screening, and it's going to be at the UE Mona at 11. But as I said, you'll get more information about that. If you are not already on our mailing list, you can just send us a message on social media at ACIJJMB on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. You can always reach us. One other thing I wanted to mention, we're going to mention it, but Georgette mentioned earlier Signature Style, who so graciously, and every time Georgette tells me what else she's done, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. But who has so graciously loaned us some pairs of Clarks for the exhibition, as well as Tribe 9 Studios, which Troy Orin will be speaking at the launch. But anybody else you'd want to thank?
Oh, we also want to thank Edna Manley, College of the Visual and Performing Arts, who will be doing an installation for us to create the dancehall environment so you can have an immersive experience when you come to see the exhibition. We are still taking on more sponsors, but as soon as they come, we'll let you know. Also, for the school tour, our educational officer will be launching a booklet in light of the inscription of reggae music under our theme for Jamaica popular music. So she'll be launching that book that tells you about the Jamaica music genres, and she'll be doing it in all the schools that she'll be visiting across Jamaica.
All right, so thank you so much for tuning into another episode in the Curating Culture Seminar series. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.